Afternoon, my name is Christopher Pearson. I'm the Small Pools Manager from the Solution Centre for Marginal Fields, Oil and Gas Technology Centre. We're going to do a sort of 10-minute presentation around Marginal Fields and what work we're doing within the Solution Centre. I believe we're live streaming this at the same time, so I've got to hold the microphone up and Jordan will keep me right if it drops too low as we go. We'll just kick off straight into the presentation. We're using this product called SharpCloud at the moment. The way that we use SharpCloud is really, instead of a presentation, to talk through the story a little bit. Use it like a storyboard. One piece that we can talk to is around why small pools. What are they about? There's effectively something in the order of 3.5 billion barrels of oil trapped at the moment. Up higher. 3.5 billion barrels of oil trapped at the moment, economically stranded, as it were. And so the Solution Centre is entirely focused on getting those trapped resources out. Within the Oil and Gas Technology Centre, there is a number of solution centres. The Marginal Fields is the one that we're looking here. There's quite a delay on the screen, so excuse me for a moment. So here we can talk to the resource base, something like 3.5 million barrels. Value to the UK economy is something like 135 billion sterling. So although it's small in nature, it's massive in terms of prize. Are you having trouble hearing me at the back? I apologize for that. I'll try and speak up a little bit. Small space, but a lot of background noise. So last October, the Oil and Gas Authority released an information pack on the Marginal Fields. The information pack is still available to download from their website, including the maps which show the location, size, and nature of the challenge ahead of us from a small pools point of view. Getting some feedback from the other one. The purpose of the SharpCloud presentation is really to talk about the interconnectivity of everything. There is not one thing that we can do that will automatically release those barrels. So it's about the interconnectivity between small pools, about clustering, about bringing some of those resources together as individual fields, about bringing them together in a cluster, and then looking for new development technologies that can allow it to be economically developed. The aspirations from our point of view at small pools are around about looking at how we can do rapid tiebacks. That was a wake-up call after lunch. Sorry about that. I don't know if it's the guy next to me or if it's me, but never mind. He's large electromagnetic field coming off him, perhaps. So the point is about small pools is we're looking at how we can do them cheaply, cost effectively, reduce the cost by 50%, do them in half the time. That's some of the metrics that we're looking to improve upon. We've been working with the Oil and Gas Authority, figuring out what are the mechanisms that we need to do that. There's no set of sort of silver widgets, single things that we can go and do. So it's going to be an integrated suite of technologies that we can apply. And we're currently working with a number of developers and as well as a number of organizations that we'll come on to later in the presentation and talk to how we can collaborate and work together to figure out some of the solutions for the marginal fields. So this just shows some of the work we've been doing to date. It doesn't matter what we do, whether it's mechanically connected pipe that we can be reused, pipe that can be welded cheaper or more efficiently together and installed in the North Sea. There are other elements and groups that we're working with, such as if we want to go to distributed power networks, how does that work? Do we still need umbilicals? Can we do away with the umbilical, do away with the power lines? Can we then go and do something entirely different, have distributed power networks that are tied to some of these subsea fields? Can we then use offshore renewable energy in a slightly different way, integrate the two energy sectors? Either floating wind, tide, current, wave, etc. So there's a number of themes that we're working to. A number of pieces of work that we've already done. One piece, my colleague Graham at the background is looking very thoughtful at the moment. Oh. This is the joy of doing everything live, obviously. So one of the things we're doing is working with the Scottish Fishermen's Federation, thinking out what does the next generation of subsea wells look like? Do we have to design for over-trawlability? Is there a better way to do this? Some of these fields are only going to be in place for 3 or 5 years. So what would we do differently that would allow us from a design concept all the way through to recovery? What would we do differently that would allow us to change the capital structure? You can see some of the prizes if we change the way that we work, and these are not general gross value add, these are just an impact in terms of capital and operating expenditure. You see some of the size of the prizes by changing the way we work are quite substantive. Hello, Slim. So an engineering study has been done. We're looking at how we can carry this out. We're looking at what suite of technologies we'd allow to obviously ensure safety of life at sea, but also so when we put a small field together, it may only be there for 3 or 5 years. What would we need to do to then clear the seabed and leave it clean entirely and protect, obviously, the fishermen and work with them? So the current status, anywhere between 1.5 and 3 billion. That's what we think the capital saving could be across the life of some of them. And we're putting a roadmap together with some industry stakeholders, including the fishermen, to figure out what would that look like, what suite of technologies would we have. One of the other themes we've been working towards, and again, I hope Jean-Claude gives you a sense of how interconnected everything is as we go. We ran a competition in support of the Oil and Gas Authority in the 30th licensing round, the tieback of the future. And we set a challenge really to industry. What would the next subsea tieback look like? Would it just be a cheaper version of the one we've got, an incremental saving, or we could do something entirely different? So this was the start of the original concept. When we, Graham and I had a talk, we were working also with the Offshore Renewable Energy Catapult. We're working with a number of other institutions, academic institutions, and thinking about what we could do that would be different. Look, thinking about reuse, thinking about elements of what we could do that would allow us to have lower cost, faster delivered facilities in situ that we could then recover, reuse elsewhere. So you get capital expenditure recovered over a number of fields, and then see what we could do from an economics point of view. So again, working with the Oil and Gas Authority, and we presented some of this work 2 weeks ago at the 30th Round Technology Forum. And we really were, it was a good feedback, I think. It was an interesting day. It was a busy day. Some of the work that we've done has come out and been taken forward by Wood Mackenzie. These are some of the companies involved. It was a very big cross-section of industry, from the design houses all the way through. I believe the presentations are going to be on the website afterwards. Yeah, I'm looking for someone to agree. All right, excellent. And so we saw a way to halve the cost in half the time. We've done subsea tiebacks in 10 months before, but that's not become the norm. That's become the exception. Generally, sort of 18 to 24 months seems to be the time it takes to do a tieback. So with Mackenzie, we shared some of the work, and Graham, my colleague at the back there, shared with Wood Mackenzie, and this is what they came up with. They thought something like the work that we've done to date suggests there's another 400 million barrels just from this early phases of work that are now economically sanctionable at $50, which effectively is another 4 billion in terms of petroleum revenue from the government's point of view. So we've only been up and running 6 or 7 months now. And already we're seeing there's a roadmap sort of beginning to evolve of how we can do and apply technology in a slightly different way, how we can integrate across marine renewables, how we can integrate the energy sectors, and approach the problem slightly differently. The Wood Mackenzie report, I believe, has been published as of yesterday. So who are the people that we're talking to? Who are the people that we're playing as we go through? A number of companies. Some of the operating companies, our view is that we want to get technology rapidly development, but more interestingly deployed across multiple locations. I think one of the barriers that technologists have seen to date is getting actually in field trials, and that's what the OGTC is about. We're here to co-fund, we're here to bring things together, and with our membership network, allow people to rapidly get something applied on their site. There's a large group of companies that are working with us, supporting us, giving us benefit in kind, as well as doing work with us. And I won't go through all the companies. I think it's self-evident from that point of view. And again, some of the themes we've already carried out, some of the things we're working on at the moment, and we're trying to improve in terms of the technology. And then from our point of view, it's worth running through just a couple more sort of summary points, or summary slides. So we touched briefly upon the size of the opportunity, effectively 3.5 billion barrels, over 350 fields. Not all of them are considered small pools. Roughly speaking, the UK is about 420, 25, something of that order, of which these are discoveries. So these have all been drilled already. There's been some form of appraisal drilling. They're not just a glint in a geophysicist's eye from that point of view. The aspiration is that we have nothing technically stranded. That doesn't mean people will have invested in them, but that does mean we've got a suite of technologies that lower the investment cost or the life cycle cost. And it's worth summarizing again some of the challenges we face. These pools are small. I mean, they're small in nature, but large in value from our point of view. But 70% of them are very small, less than 10 million barrels. They're in a large volume of them are within close proximity, certainly within 20 or 25 kilometers of existing infrastructure. So you can see why we've developed a suite of thinking, as it were, and the themes about the tieback of the future, about the standalone. If we have the next generation of standalone FPSOs, they're unmanned, they're automated, they may be below the surface, they may be above the surface. That changes the economics in a very drastic way in terms of the OPEX element coming out of it. And then that utility, that in terms of economic utility, that facility can then be utilized across multiple deployments. So these just summarizes some of the things we've done so far, some of our thinking, some of the things that we're trying to achieve. One of the interesting ones, and we haven't cracked it for sure as an industry, is gas to power. Is it possible in the southern basin to sell gas to the wellhead and a utility provider to take the gas, convert it into electricity, and then sell it into an existing converter station as part of an offshore wind farm? So again, we're working with the Oil and Gas Authority, we're working with a few companies, we're working with some universities, including Strathclyde. Willie's there in the background. Looking at what we could do together and rethink that problem, but not think it from an oil and gas point of view, think of it from an integrated solution. So we've got a utility provider who is used to providing electricity, oil and gas company who can drill a well and sell the gas at the wellhead. So it's a slightly different approach. We're also working with Zero Waste Scotland on the tieback of the future, and it's worth summarizing a little bit. I'll just flip through the slides. So this is a summary of the slides we've done so far. But one of the elements that came out of that was that we have an ethos, and we'd like to develop this ethos that says we're going to design for disassembly, not decommissioning. If by intrinsic design we can have a plan that says we're going to design the equipment, install it, recover the oil or gas, recover it, and then either additive manufacturing, ready it for reuse, then redeploy it and put it somewhere else, then again the economics entirely change, because now we're going over 3 or 5 fields. We're going to recover the capital costs and then almost operate the facilities as a service to the operator. So it does open up new commercial opportunities. You'll be glad to know that's the end of the chat slightly. Jordan's very happy. This last slide really says what we're about here today. There's an opportunity for more companies to get involved. There's an opportunity for new institutions, academic institutions, as well as individuals to bring their ideas to us. We're not necessarily looking for cash. We're well funded, but we are looking for ideas and people who are willing to collaborate. And I think from that point, we now open up to the floor for questions from anyone. You don't even have one question, Slim. Either I bored you entirely, you're digesting lunch and you've got no brain power left. This is a very easy gig then. You're letting me off very lightly. Paul Lindop is not going to let me off without a question. I can almost guarantee it. Willie.
Chris. Yeah. Tell us a little bit about the time scale of things.
Yeah, all right.
And time scale for development. And how, is it 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 5 year? What's your time horizon?
Some of these fields are very marginal. The operating life, economic operating life, is 3 to 5 years. Generally, we design for 15 to 25. So with the same design premise, we can look to change the way that we design it and have multiple locations. So we'd install the equipment and then recover it and redeploy it somewhere else. That's the intent behind the design for disassembly, not decommissioning. And that's a change. The circular economy talks to that. The circular economy talks, and the best example I can give is Philips, who instead of selling you a light bulb, will sell you light. So Philips will provide you with the facilities that you need to, obviously, to have light, and then they keep that service going. They'll take it out. They'll say when the light bulb is finished its useful life, they'll take it back, recondition it, and then redeploy it somewhere else. And that sort of ESIF is what we're about.
Time scale for these projects and impact.
Testing. Yeah, I'm not quite sure I get the question in terms of when the oil. Sorry, Willie. The impact of what we're doing in terms of financial impact.
No.
Oh, when we'll be deploying the first suite of technologies. Well, we hope in that slide that I flashed up earlier, within sort of 3 to 5 years for the next phase. If you think about government permits and consents, etc., to get the field development plans approved, as well as bring that technology to us, then we're hoping within sort of 3 to 5 years. Does that answer your question? Eventually. Slim.
I'll ask the question so everybody can hear me. I'm not totally clear on where you are today. Is any impact on tax? Have you looked at the impact of changing the tax system for small? Tough question.
Okay, so the T&R name stands for technology, not tax. But there is obviously a recognized part of the economics in terms of the fiscal regime in the UKCS. That's not our remit, but working with the Oil and Gas Authority, clearly, if that was seen as the only barrier to some of the economic developments, and as an ex-operator, you might appreciate that, then there may be more developments sanctioned for investment. That's part of the story, though, about the way that we can transfer some of the ownership on late life assets. One of the ways to create more value on a late life asset is to tie new product back through it. And there is a tax issue there, which is being looked at the moment. I think the Treasury, UK Treasury, has a special focus group looking at that. So does that answer part of your question? Okay.
Yeah, I was listening. So, it's both ways. Yeah, Chris, we've got lots of unmanned gas platforms. How long do you think it'll be before we have an unmanned oil installation?
Yeah. So my view on that, I would like to think within that same sort of time frame of 5 years to have the first automated oil installation. I think lots of companies, and Premier are one of them on the west of Shetlands at the moment, who are faced for economic circumstances to downman and automate their platforms to a high degree. That was never the original plan, so obviously there's an engineering cost involved there, but that's part of the premise for ourselves, that when we look at clusters and your own specialist area, the Outer Moray Firth and your own special interest group, etc., we're very interested in seeing how quickly we could get that technology to the market and what would the barriers be. So whether it's the HSE, working with the HSE, working with the OGA, working with the operators themselves, insurance companies, etc. The whole gamut of people that are going to be engaged in that conversation is quite critical from our point of view. Good question. Yeah, thank you. You can hear. Do you want me to repeat the entire answer? Mike heard it, yeah. So we're just saying that automation and unmanned oil facilities, we think within 5 years that would be a target. Certainly for sanction point of view, the challenge is clearly if we think about the Atamari Firth, it's the environment that we're going to be working in. For instance, think of the central North Sea where we have the largest amount of FPSOs. Down-manning them is fairly straightforward at the moment, but getting them fully unmanned, there may be several steps to get to that stage from our point of view. But we're certainly looking within 5 years. I feel I'm going to be swallowing this mic in a moment, so. Good question. Anyone else? Oh.
Okay. Is that okay? If people can hear me, what can we do to help you? And Mike and I, in particular, Chris has kindly alluded, we're running the first industry-led area plan special interest group in the Atamari Firth. What can we, representing that group of companies and the knowledge base, do to help you deliver that vision?
Thank you, Paul. I think part of it is the collaborative nature, as we recognized from our previous lives. I think understanding some of the challenges that you as an organization would see from your members, etc. Understanding the technology suite. Obviously, we've got a roadmap for how we think it should be done, guided by our members, and I flashed that up earlier. And I think that's an important piece because rather than the OGTC coming up with its own roadmap, its own view of the world, as it were. We're a much more inclusive organization. And if, for instance, if you think automation isn't the issue, but cultural change is the issue, although that's not necessarily our remit, identifying that as a barrier and then identifying a group that can work towards a solution or removal of that barrier will be key. So that's a slightly woolly answer, but I hope that was okay. Okay. Thank you very much. Kind audience.